Hello, welcome. I might be a little more scattered today than usual because I'm just gonna be that way today. Today is the Only Good Indians book review, book summary actually. Obviously, this is quite late because this was a book that I believe I did for November of 2023, and usually I would put these out at the end of the following month. It's been a couple months, but life has been busy. In the time that I have had to sit with it and through the process of writing the book review, which I wanted to do this book justice, so I would say go check out the book review. But let's just get into the story, right? And just tell the story of this book. Just so you know, this is a horror book. So things might be gory or horrific. There might be some really fucked up imagery that I describe if you are sensitive to that, so just be aware. So the book opens up with this dude named Richard Boss Ribs. He is a Native American dude that is working on an oil rig in North Dakota in the middle of nowhere. He is running from something. We don't know what, but we know that he's like just moving from place to place, finding jobs as an obscure dude. He's working on this oil crew. He's very much ostracized. They call him Chief, and that's not his name. And he's basically he's longing for whatever he has run from, which includes these three friends: Lewis, Cass, and Gabe. And so he's in this bar, drowning away his sorrows, missing his homeboys, and he's also keeping an eye on like some biker gang or some people up in the corner that are eyeing him, and he's feeling very kind of under scrutiny, and so he goes out to pee. All right, so he goes out to the parking lot to pee, and while he's out there pissing, out of nowhere there's this elk that comes out of like the darkness, and it just starts freaking out. It starts destroying the bikes and the cars everywhere, kicking, going crazy. And Richard, he's just freaked out. And then the elk just runs off, and then the people start coming out the bar like, yo, what the fuck happened to my shit? And he's like, fuck, they're gonna blame this on me. So he runs off into the dark, and he's running and running, and he trips over this fence. And when he gets up, he suddenly sees that he's surrounded by elk, and they're all staring at him and approaching him. And then it's like scene over. And then next scene, we open up. A lot of the book is broken up into days. So we open up on Friday, and we meet Lewis, one of the dudes that Richard was missing. And he's a postman. Like I said, he was Richard's friend. They call him Ricky, Richard, whatever. And he's fixing something on his ceiling, a light fixture, and the light fixture is like by a rotating fan, like a ceiling fan, and he is staring down through the blades of the fan as they're twirling, and suddenly he sees the body of a baby elk, like a young elk, but it's also pregnant. And it's dead on his carpet. And he's like, yo, what the fuck? And he's about to fall down into the blades of the fan, but his wife comes home, and she like hits the ladder, and him and the ladder fall this way, and so she saves him. Then the next day is Saturday, and Lewis is at his job, and he's supposed to be training his new co-worker named Shani. She's a Native American woman from the Crow tribe. They work for the post office, but he dips off just to go call his friend Cass, another one of Ricky's friends, for that he was missing in the bar. And so he calls Cass, and he's calling Cass because he can't get this baby elk off his mind. So it's somehow related to this, right? In their conversation, we confirm that Ricky is indeed dead. And the way that it reports his death is like he was beat up outside of a bar. They talk about their families for a bit, but we'll get into all that later because it's not really important here. And then Lewis asks Cass, do you remember Duck Lake? And they mentioned this vindictive game warden called Denny Pease that screwed them over. But it's clear, they mentioned that, but it's clear that they did something fucked up because they're like tiptoeing around what actually happened. And it's clear that Lewis has a lot of guilt over whatever happened here. Oh, and Lewis asks if he thinks that the Elks remember them. And Cass says that they're probably like legends to the Elk, and that the Elks probably remember them as like the four butchers / boogeymen of Duck Lake. So it's like, oh, like you guys did some fucked up shit over here. And then Lewis is like, Cass is kind of laughing it off. Lewis is like, bro, do you think they really remember? And Cass is like, bro, they're Elk. Of course they don't. And then Cass is like, oh, like, is this about that hunting knife that you said you lost that night? And then Lewis is just like, yeah, you're right. It's about that knife I lost that night. He's like, you know what? Just forget about it. Like, it's whatever, right? He hangs up on Cass, and then Shaney appears, and it's clear that, like, in their banter and stuff, there's some clear, like, flirting and testing of boundaries. Shaney's mentioning his wife and stuff. You know, you can hear the games. Then we move to Monday. Lewis is bringing his co-workers to his house so they can watch his dog jump over the fence because he has a really old dog and it's not supposed to be able to do that, and it does that, and that's amazing because not much happens. Nothing really happens here, you know, they don't be doing shit. So he's like, come watch my dog jump my fence. He's 10 years old, it's impossible, it's amazing, come watch it, right? So he's taking his co-workers Silas, Jerry, Eldon, and Shaney all over to his place. They go to his house and they go to Lewis's backyard, but they can't find the dog. And so Lewis is looking everywhere. And he's like, bro, where'd this dog go? He's like, bro, I'm about to kill this dog. And then Shaney is like, she's like, I think you're a little late for that. Which is like, bro, so cavalier to say, but it's because we see that Harley is hanging from his collar from a corner of the fence. So apparently, like, he has strangled himself essentially. And Lewis is like so despairing. He's crying. This dog was a gift from him from his wife Peta like 6 years ago. So he's crying. And then while he's doing that, Harley gives a sudden kick. He just gives a sudden kick, and while everyone's frozen, Silas, one of the co-workers, he runs forward and pulls the dog off of the fence. And while Silas is doing that, like, Lewis freezes, like, everyone is kind of frozen, but Lewis freezes because the kick of his dog Harley's foot kind of reminded him of the kick of an elk's foot. And it's like this weird moment of association, which, I mean, it's just like part of the horror, right? And so he falls back in fear, and everyone's like, bro, are you good? And he's like, yeah. But while Silas is holding on to Harley, the dog lashes out and bites his cheek, and he tries to swing it out of the way. And then we pop into the next chapter. They do that a lot with these, where like they'll end the chapter with the implication of something and then like tell you what happened at the end, like how that scene ended in hindsight in the following chapter. I don't know if that I like horror really written that way, where it's like you're already past the moment of tension when you're discussing it. It feels like it kind of robs the punch of a horror book, which, like I've said, I wish this was more marketed as a literary fiction book, because the way it's structured, it's all structured more towards meaning than it is towards horror, in my opinion. But again, let's continue with the plot, right? So, so Harley bites Silas's cheek. Silas tries to swing him out of the way, and then we're into the next chapter, which is Tuesday. And Tuesday, Lewis is putting masking tape on his carpet to outline the elk shape that's in his head that he thinks that like he saw through the fan blades. And he's doing this while PETA is helping or is taking care of Harley post-strangulation. She's taking care of him in the garage, and homie is in the living room outlining the deer. And I'm just like while I was reading this book, I was like, bro, Lewis is ridiculous. Like, I understand, like, this is real, and like this was really horror, but like if I didn't know that, I would just be like, homie, like, your dog almost strangled. I would go be with him. I would not be putting this masking tape down. But again, back to the thing. So he's putting this masking tape down, doing the outline. We learned that Silas's cheek was actually torn open, so they took him to the hospital. And then PETA came home. We learned that, like, what do you call it? Lewis is doing this a couple hours after Harley bit Silas. So PETA came home, and the coworkers drove Silas to the hospital. And PETA comes in, and she asks Lewis if he wants help. And it's supposed to be like this moment, like, oh, she's supporting him, right? And he admires her support, and we learn that he's never told her whatever this elk story is that is kind of haunting him, right? He's told her like half truths and stuff regarding what occurred, but he's never come out and said what's actually happened, right? And again, at this point, as an audience member, we don't know what's happening. He brings out an elk hide from the freezer. So this is clearly an elk that he has killed, and he brings it and he places it on top of, it's like a frozen one from his freezer. He places it in the middle of the masking tape body shape elk. So assumably this is that elk that he is seeing in these visions, is this elk that he has killed all these years ago. Then he puts the ladder and he climbs back up the ladder to look down at the elk and PETA through the blades of the fan. But he doesn't see anything, like nothing, no flashing visions or anything comes to him. And he's like, bro, where, like, I know that there is something. And then through the blades of the fan, he actually sees the dent that the ladder made in the wall when PETA pushed him in the ladder to save his life. In the hole in the wall that the ladder made, he sees a flickering figure that looks like a woman shaped with a weird head, right? And then we go to Wednesday, right? Lewis wakes up to the sound of a ball being dribbled outside, right? He goes through his driveway and he sees Shani, the new Crow Tribe worker, co-worker of his, and she is playing basketball in his driveway. And he's like, what are you doing here? His wife has already left because she works at the airport, so she has like weird hours, and so it's just him and this flirty co-worker here, right? She's like, did I wake you up? And he's like, yo, I took the day off, and she's like, to spend with your dog because, you know, he almost died. And then she tells Lewis, she's like, you know he's dying, right? And then he doesn't really respond, and she's like, your wife probably wouldn't want me here. You know, just doing more of these games. It's like, yo, I'm here to borrow a book. And so apparently Lewis is known for all these fantasy books and that he'd be reading and stuff. So she's like, I'm here for some books. And he's like, bet. So he goes and he gives, but the way she asked for it, it's suggestive. She's like, I want something really long and exciting and shit, you know, the games. And so he's like, yeah, sure, I got some shit. They play horny basketball for a bit. Her shirt rides up and he sees that her stomach has some scarring. And so he's like, bro, what has this woman gone through? She absolutely cooks him in basketball. And he tries to not get horny, and then he goes and gets the book, right? While he's they go inside the house to go get the book, Shani sees the shape of the elk outlining that he did, and she adds more detail to it using the masking tape. And then she asks him, like, yo, what's the story behind it? Because he's amazed. He's like, how did she know how to, like, fill out the shape of that elk? She's like, yo, what's that all about? And he's like, wow. And it literally puts it this way in the book. He was like, will this hot girl from work know what my wife does not? Because again, he has not told his wife this story. And the answer is yes, because we immediately go to flashback And we learn about this day, this snowy day, all those years ago, right? And it's Lewis and the boys. So Ricky, Cass, Gabe, and Lewis. And they're all in this truck and they're hunting. It's like the last day of the season to hunt. And they all really, really want to get a elk to bring back as a sign of provision and food and whatever. But there's also like a lot of like ego wrapped up in it, because, and you'll see where that comes out later, because it's not really about wanting to provide, because they gorge themselves on excess, and that's part of the message. But anyway, so they're not finding any luck, and they're like, yo, let's go into the elder section. And that's like a forbidden thing for specific reasons that we don't need to go in there. But it's not like they can't go in there, they just can't take their truck in there, but they do, because they're trying to get a lot. So right, so they drive up there, they're going through all this crazy terrain, right? And then they get up on this hill and they're looking down, and there's this herd. They're up above this place called Duck Lake, which is why Lewis was like, you remember Duck Lake, right? So they're up on this bluff and they're looking down, and there is a herd of elk down there. And they just sit up on that ridge and line up their scopes, and they go pom, pom, pom. They literally massacre. At the end of it, they kill 9 of them, but they're just shooting into this crowd of elk. There's a lot of, like, this is a horror book. It's a lot of the horror comes out in the description, because a lot of the violence that they're inflicting, you can see it being mirrored onto them. And in this scene, it's shown through the injury that the scope on Lewis's rifle does to his eye. It's like injuring his eye with each time it kicks back, but he's so focused on his bloodlust that he doesn't notice it, right? So they kill 9 elk, and they all run down to go cut up the haunches and do everything. But when they get down there, Lewis sees this baby elk, and it's weird because she's like a baby, but she's not like a newborn. She's just like, I was gonna use human terms, but that makes it weirder. But she's a young elk, and she's too young to be pregnant, which she is. And so he's looking at this baby elk that's somehow pregnant, a baby, quote unquote, but very, very young elk that is pregnant, that is somehow not dead. And so she is like struggling to get up on her limbs, and she's crying out, and Lewis is like, ugh. And so he puts the blicky to her head again, and he puts the scope right against the deer's head and shoots it and blows its brain out. And it's just like, ugh. And then it comes back to life, somehow not dead, and it starts trying to stand up again. And so he has to shoot the other side of its head off, blows it to smithereens, and then it falls over. But this leaves him completely shaken. He's like, bro, not only was this already a bad scene, like, this is what I've had to do to complete this is just ugh. And then we flashback back to the present, and because PETA has now walked in and seen Cheney and Lewis talking about this very personal story, so obviously bad news, because homie has been moving a little weird. And so then we go to Friday. He wakes up on Friday hearing their garage door opening and PETA missing out of the bed. So he goes down to the garage door and he finds her crouched on the ground, holding the body of Harley, their dog, and he has been smashed to a pulp, like absolutely just pounded into smithereens. And they are like, she's in her pajamas holding his absolutely smashed body, and they're like, bro, what the fuck could have done this? And he goes and throws up, and he's like, oh, like, what is happening? And it looks like he's been stomped by elk feet. While they're going through this very charged moment with each other, talking about Harley's dead body, they talk about what happened with Shaney, and she's like, why would you tell her a story that you've never even opened up and told me about? So then he tells PETA the ending of the story, which is that he cut the baby elk open and there was it was pregnant, so there was a baby inside of it. And so he buried that baby, and then he resolved to use every part of the elk that he killed to make sure that her life did not go to waste, because he was feeling super duper guilty. When him and the homies were trying to leave with all of their spoils, they ran into Denny Pease, the game warden that they said was vindictive and stuff. And he was like, you guys can either pay the fine for all of these elk, or you can throw all these bodies back and you guys never come back, right? But Lewis begs to keep the body of the elk, and Denny lets him. After they have this talk, Peter goes into the house and pulls up all the tape that Lewis made to make the outline of the elk body. Then we have Saturday, and Lewis is working on his motorcycle, and two cops come up and they just basically start harassing him about Harley biting Silas on the cheek. Silas didn't press anything, but they were like, yo, we gotta go do something. So they show up to his place, and he's like, my dog is dead. He leads them to Harley's grave, and he's like, yo, there's nothing to do here. My dog is already dead, bro, yo. And so then they're like, we need proof that your dog is dead, so we need to search your house. And it's like, bro, his grave is right here. And they're like, so you can either dig up the grave or we're searching the entire house. And he's like, you're not searching my house. And so they're like, we're coming back with a permit. And so he's like, fuck. So he goes back and he goes into his garage, and he finds 2 copies of the series that he had loaned, the fantasy book series that he had loaned to Shani when she came over for Sexy Basketball. And he's like, bro, when did these get here? And then he starts thinking about what it is that could have killed his dog. So he starts searching everywhere in his house, looking for like hammers, mallets, whatever. He's like, bro, what did this? And then he just can't find what it is. So he sits down, gives up, and then he sees a trail of ants going to a pair of boots, a pair of plastic boots that both him and his wife use. They're just big plastic rain boots that just be taken out. But the cover of them, the bottom of them are covered in the viscera of Harley, and that's what all the ants are crawling to. And he's like, oh my God, did PETA put on these boots and stomp out Harley? Is she the elk deer woman that is haunting me? While he's mentally freaking out, he grabs the boots and he runs out to Harley's grave, and he's like about to dig up Harley's grave to like match the boots to the body or something. Like, he doesn't even know. He's just panicking. He's freaking out. But he stops himself in the process of that, and he's like, bro, what am I even doing? And then even like, do I even want to confirm this, that PETA would do this? And his house is near some train tracks that are like on a raised train tracks, and he's under the train. That's where they buried Harley, and the train passes in that moment. And so he looks up, he sees like flashes of the elk-headed woman, and like his brain is like, bro, is she wearing the reflective jacket of like the airport workers? Because his brain is like kind of seeing it as PETA now, and because he's suspecting her, and he's like, bro, is it PETA? Scene ends. Next day, Sunday, and Lewis is acting weird because now he thinks that PETA might be the elk-headed woman. So he pretends to sleep until she leaves for her job. We learn that when she got home last night, like, he was really closed off. She asked him what's wrong. He was like, I'm just sad about Harley. He fake sleeps until she leaves, and then he's like laying in bed, and he's like looking in the reflection of the window because he hears footsteps, and he sees like the smudge of a reflection, and he's like, hey, you got me. And he turns around and there's no one there, and he's like, bro, I'm losing my mind. He goes to go make a sandwich, and in the process of making the sandwich, he drops something, and when he goes to get it, he discovers another volume of the book, another book of the series that he gave Shani. And he's like, bro, how are these getting everywhere? And as he's looking through the book, he sees that she's written in it, and she's left like little notes and stuff. Some of the notes are what make elk so special. They have nothing to do with the book at all. They're just like questions pertaining to their elk conversation. And she's like, what makes elk so special? And while he's thinking about her notes, he's like coming up with theories about how the elk woman is hunting him, why it's happening now after 10 years. And he's thinking that it's because like now only recently, like the last of her meat must have gone bad and spoiled, and now her spirit is finally unrested and is coming after him. So he's just doing huge leaps in logics, right? Another one of her notes is just the word ivory with a question mark, and he extrapolates that maybe she means that he would be able to identify who the elk woman is by finding ivory, because elk have ivory canine teeth apparently. By the time PETA comes home later in that day, he has completely deconstructed his bike, just tearing it apart, right? And so she asks to play basketball with him. Like she's like, yo, babe, chill. Like, let's play some basketball, connect. They have a blast. He loves basketball because he gets horny again, and then they have sex. And then next day, right? So now it's Monday. He's put the engine and a wheel and the chain back on his bike. So that's all of his bike that he has rebuilt in his garage. He asked Shani to ask a coworker to bring a bike park. He's just coming up with an excuse for Shani to come to his house. And so he's invited Shani to come to his place to do something, and she agrees. And he wants to invite her to the living room because he wants to look at her through the blades of the fan to identify whether she's the elk woman or not. Because he's like, we're getting about to the bottom of this. No more, right? He organizes this all for the next day, Tuesday. So Tuesday comes, and he finds that someone has dug up Harley's grave. So Harley's remains are just everywhere. And he pukes, and then he pulls himself together, and he's like, let's lock in, right? He takes the elk hide out of his freezer again, and he puts it on the kitchen table. While he's undoing its bundle, he finds his old hunting knife from all those years back, and he's like, it was here the whole time. Puts in its back pocket, symbolism type shit. And then he climbs up onto the ladder, and he's waiting for Shani to come in. When she comes in, he's up on the ladder, and he's telling her he wants to be up on the ladder so he'd be like, yo, can you grab that for me? So she'll come into the light and under the fan. And so as he's asking her, like, she won't step into the light, and he's like, come on. And then when she finally gets out, she turns off the fan, and he's like, bro, she's on to me. Like, no matter what I do, she won't fall into this trap of me being able to see her through the fan blades to confirm whether she's the elk-headed woman or not. Because, again, she only appears when things are, like, passing through. She turns off the fan, and he's like, fuck, yo. And then she gives him the part that he asked her to bring. And she's about to dip, and he's like, wait. I have one more thing to show you. And so he brings her into the garage with the part she brought, and he's like getting the engine and his wheel on the bike running and stuff. And he's like, watch this happen. And she's just bored, whatever. And he hits some shit, and he gets her hair caught in the wheel of it, and it rips her scalp off, and her forehead falls into the spinning wheel and shears it off. And he murders her. Again, this was a horror book. All right, and then we go to the next chapter, same day though, and he goes full Crime and Punishment, cleaning up the body of Shani while trying to do reverse logic for killing her, trying to be like, yo, that was her, right? That was the crow. She was the deer-headed woman. She had to be. Like, he's just going in these mental gymnastic circles. And this leads him to getting a screwdriver and digging out her canines, Shani, out of her mouth to verify that her canines were ivory, which they aren't. And then he's like, yo, fuck. And he's about to pull up her stomach to see if her stomach is scarred, because during that time when he was making connections, he was like, I cut that elk open and she had that scar on her stomach. Connection?
Ah, fuck me, I just made the whole connection.
Before he can pull her shirt up, Peeta comes home and he's like, fuck. And again, he did all this murder in the garage. So he runs into the main room and he's about to be like, hey babe, what's going on? But he sees that Peeta is actually up on the ladder, and she's holding, when he climbed off the ladder, he had jammed his hunting knife into the light fixture. So she's pulling the knife out and she looks down and she stumbles because he's covered in Shani's blood, which he completely forgot. And so when she stumbles, the ladder starts tipping, and I can't lie to you, this part of the book made me laugh a little, because I'm like, bro, as far as a death description, like, what the fuck? She starts to, the ladder tips and she starts to fall off, and the book is like, she would have been fine, but Peeta used to be a gymnast, and so she tries to do like this cool ass backflip, hits her head on the mantle, bleeds out, and dies, right? He's watching her slowly die, like twitching and shit, and he is like moving through molasses, slowly walking towards her like, ain't no way this is happening to me. I'm just like, bro, this dude, pull it together, yo. He watches her slowly die, and he's just like, Peeta, and she's dead. And then he thinks of, because again, Peeta was also on his suspect list, but he had just gone for Shani first. But he was like, well, I mean, she's dead. Let me see if this was the elk-headed woman. So he pulls out his handy dandy Mauska tool, the screwdriver, and digs her canines out, and they are also not ivory. And he's like, fuck. I am like, with each act, he has become more and more of a horrible person. And he's like, not only that, I have murdered 2 women now. While he's being stunned about that, he sees something moving under Peeta's shirt. And if you remember when I said that they played horny basketball and had sex, it was unprotected, and he suspects that he makes like this instant leap of logic, but the way it's written, it's as if like an instinctual knowing, right? And he knows that in the day that he had, or like probably like 12 hours since he had sex with her, he had impregnated her, and that baby had grown up and was now this entity that was stirring under her shirt, right? He takes his old hunting knife, and like the elk from all those years ago, cuts her open and pulls out a deer baby, a baby elk. Then we flash forward a little bit, and it's 2 days after that, and he has driven all the way back to his reservation, parked the car somewhere, and is walking down just a highway, trying to take this baby elk back to the scene of the crime where he murdered its mom. It's like this symbolic full circle moment, right? And he's just compelled to do this. And so he's walking, and as he's walking, there are these 4 like highway patrolmen, I believe, and they're up on the ridge, and they see him walking, and they shoot him, and they kill him. And it's described as like him feeling the bullets thunder through his body like hooves. Like it's very much like fate catching up to him. But he gets shot, and in this moment of death, he learns that the elk-headed woman's name is Ponoka. I hope, and I'm probably maybe saying that wrong, but a newspaper segment ends this part of the book, because it's broken up into like 4 sections, and it basically shows us that 4 dudes that killed Lewis put him and this bundle that he was carrying in the back of their truck, And in the middle of them driving, suddenly a 12-year-old girl stood up from the back of the truck and charged them like an elk and wrecked the truck, killing all but one of them, who is the one that is reporting this news story. Then we head into part 2 of the book, and this one is called Sweat Lodge Massacre. So we're now in Sweat Lodge Massacre. Lewis is dead, so we switch perspectives. We are now in the perspective of... we open up in... it's Friday, quote unquote, and we open up in Ponoka's perspective, and we basically hear her perspective of the past few days and the past decade of her determination to track all these people down and murder them being Gabe, Lewis, Cass, and Ricky, 2 of which she has killed already now. And she is now in the body of this 12-year-old girl that rose up from the back of that pickup truck. Now she is stalking the daughter of Gabe, one of the 2 people left. We switch to this chapter where we see the daughter. Her name is Denora, and she's sitting in class, and they're talking about the news, which is Lewis being shot. And they learn that we learn that Denora is really good at basketball. She looks out the window and she sees Ponoka staring at her from the shadows, and she's dressed in Denora's workout gear. And Denora's like, am I bugging, or is that a girl that is wearing my shit, right? Because she kind of looks like Denora a little bit. Pass into the next chapter, and we are in the perspective of Denora's dad, Gabe. And Gabe has not seen his daughter in weeks. He's the type to be getting drunk and causing a ruckus at her basketball games, fighting other parents and shit. Like, he's one of those. Denora's stepdad, so the one that his ex-wife has remarried to, is Denny Pease, the warden that they hate. So, needless to say, shit is not going well for Gabe. Gabe is also apparently planning to put on a sweat that night with his buddy Cass, the 2 dudes left, for a kid named Nathan, who is the son of another cop, a native dude named Victor Yellowtail. And this sweat is like a moment for cleansing and guidance for this young dude, but these 2 dudes are fuck ups, so they don't really even know how to do a sweat. They're just pretending to because they need the money, and so they're putting together a funky finger production to try and do this, right? If that needed a visual representation, we open up the chapter watching Gabe steal an old rifle from his father and take it with him, and he's headed to Ricky's grave. We learned that Ricky's been dead for a minute, but we'll get to that in a moment, because while he is driving down the street, he sees Ponoka walking down the street, but she's dressed in his daughter's workout gear again. So he's like, is that her? But he's like, nah, I'm tripping. I'm just drunk, because he is drunk a little bit. He goes to Ricky's grave. He's thinking about Denora and their past and where things went wrong. And when he leaves, he sees elk tracks in his wake. And so, like, for us as the audience, we're supposed to be like, ooh, like, she tracking him. During a lot of this chapter, like, because we open up this second portion of the book in Ponoka's perspective, I really wanted to just ride along with the spirit and follow what this story from her perspective is. But instead we just feel her creeping around as we follow along with Gabe and Cass's family issues. But again, like I said, literary fiction, it should be. But anyway, again, let's keep going. We go back to Denora's perspective. She's playing basketball. We learn that she's pretty good. She can get scholarships and stuff. She's practicing, and Gabe shows up after, in the middle of it. So he's like, I'll give you $40 if you can make 10 straight shots. And she's like, you don't have that money. And he's like, yeah, I will tonight after I do this sweat. And so she does it, and he's like, bet, you're gonna get that $40. By the way, I've stopped breaking. I honestly should have never broken this up by the chapters of this book. just a mistake. I'm just gonna keep going through what happens, right? So Cass and Gabe get ready for the sweat. Cass has 3 dogs with him on his property, and so they're just around the dogs and the horses and talking about shit. We learn that Cass has a thermos that he keeps. One, a ring for his significant other. Don't remember her name right now, but she'll come up later, so I will. But he keeps a ring for his significant other and some money in this thermos. And through this conversation between Gabe and Cass, Cass learns that Gabe knows about that thermos, which he thought was he had kept a secret from everyone. So that makes him a little suspicious. But they're interrupted by Victor showing up. Victor and his son Nathan, who the sweat is for. They start the sweat, and Gabe thinks he sees something, stand up from the back of Victor's truck, but he ignores it because it's in the shadows. Again, this is Ponica. Victor is in charge of bringing in the rocks for the sweat, and so it's Gabe, Cass, and Nathan, the boy, inside of the actual sweat lodge, and Victor's the one bringing the rocks in. So he's coming in and out, right? So he's the first one that Ponica is stalking. The whole time it's kind of describing what Ponica is doing in the periphery, so we don't really see a lot of this directly, but we know that she's killed the hounds already. And then Victor goes to the outhouse, and then she sees him there and rushes him, and so we assume that she has murdered him, right? We look over to Gabe and Cassidy, and they're inside of the lodge with Nathan, and they are actually like airing their dirty laundry, even though this is for Nathan, and they're talking about the Thanksgiving Classic, which is the name that they give to this moment where they murdered all of these elk. And at some point they realize that Victor's not bringing any more of the rocks in, so Cassidy goes out to go find him. He finds Joe, that's the name of his partner. So when he goes out to find Victor, he runs into his partner, Joe. And Joe is talking about how she came out because she had to tell him that she's leaving to attend the funeral of a cousin of hers, who is Shani, who got murdered. And he's like, oh, bet, babe, like, safe drive, have a good time, right? Personally, I think that Ponica, Shani, and Joe are all the same person. Shani and Joe are both Crow Tribe as well. So she's like, I'm going to North Dakota for the funeral, I'll be back. They say bye, and then Cassidy just goes back into the sweat lodge without finding Victor. He's like, whatever, right? Gabe is sitting in the sweat lodge, and he has a vision of him and, his boys when they were kids, dancing and shit. And when he opens his eyes, he sees the disfigured dead forms of Ricky and Lewis. And he's freaked out, so he runs out to the truck. He grabs a beer and he starts drinking and pissing. While he's doing this, he suddenly noticed that he is pissing on a dead dog's corpse. It's one of the hounds. And he's like, yo, what the fuck? And he looks further out into the darkness and he finds the other 2 dead. Well, he finds one dead and the other one's still struggling, like, And so he finds a rock and he smashes its head in. As a mercy kill, but it's like he does it so callously. And then he goes in and, like, he's drunk and disoriented. He goes to the truck, Cass's truck, and he takes out the secret thermos, with all the money and the ring. He empties it out, fills it with water. He's lightheaded because of the sweat. And he fills it with water, drinks the water, and then he goes back into the lodge, right? Both him and Cassidy are not locked in, clearly. There are these small flashes of, like, talking about Nathan trying to work through his personal issues as they pass the thermos around, pouring it on the rocks. But we won't get into Nathan's stuff because that's more wrapped up in, like, the meanings of the book rather than the plot. When Cass gets it, he freezes because he realizes this is the thermos, my secret thermos. And so he, instead of saying anything, he just hops up and leaves because he's like, I'm gonna go confirm this. He comes out, he's getting dressed in a hurry. We know that Ponoka is watching him. And then he notices blood and he slowly discovers all his dead dogs. And then he sees the bloody rock. And then when Gabe comes out to see why he left, he confronts Gabe about it. He's like, you murdered my dogs. Which, I mean, is... why would Gabe just like leave it like that? But yes, like he's just so angry, and he already is suspicious that Gabe took the thermos, and so he's turning up on Gabe, right? Gabe is drunk and disoriented and not locking in, so he's just like, bro, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? So he's not doing a good job of explaining himself. Cass gets mad and he starts breaking Gabe's side mirror on Gabe's car, and accusing him of stealing the $900 that were in the thermos, and he keeps breaking Gabe's car while he's doing this. And so Gabe just like freaks out, and so he charges Cass's truck, the one that had the thermos in it, and Cass's truck is on his land and it's on cinder blocks and stuff. It's not like functional. He pushes it over, and Cass is like, no, because for some reason, we then realize that Joe, his partner, that went up to attend Shaney's funeral, is under the truck for some reason, and the truck pushes over and crushes her body. After this, Gabe is like, yo, I'm so sorry, but Cass just goes blank. He goes and grabs the gun that Gabe stole from his dad, and he aims it at Gabe, and he's like, bro, I'm sorry, but you just gotta die for that. He prepares to kill Gabe, and he's like crying, and he's breathing deeply, and Gabe is kind of resolute because he's like, bro, I murdered her, like, I feel bad. But then a flash happens behind Gabe and throws off Cass's shot. And they look behind Gabe, and the person that Cass has shot is not Gabe. It's someone behind Gabe, and that is Denora. And Denora falls over dead. And so now Gabe is like, you killed her, you killed my daughter, yo. And so he comes over to Cass, and he starts beating him up. He grabs the thermos, Cass's thermos, and he starts beating him up, but he fucks it up at first, but Cass grabs the thermos and hands it back to him, and he's like, bro, just kill me, bro, because like I killed your daughter, like I just kill me. And so Gabe beats Cass's head in with the thermos, murders his best homie, the last homie he had left. He stands up for murdering Cass, and he walks to the body of his daughter, only to find out it wasn't his daughter, it was Nathan. So he murdered his best friend over someone that he, like, over this misunderstanding, and that Nathan is still alive. He walks away, goes to the outhouse, discovers Victor's body, and Denora and Ponoka follows him there with the rifle and gives him the rifle, and she's like, you kill yourself, or I'm going to go after your daughter Denora next. So then Gabe commits suicide so Ponoka won't go after his daughter, and then after he's dead, Ponoka is like, all right, let's finish this. I'm gonna go kill his daughter. We then go to the next scene, and Denora is showing up the morning after all this goes down, and she's showing up because she wants her $40, and she, instead of finding any of her, like her dad or Cass or anybody there, she finds Shaney there. And she's like, who are you? And Shaney is like, don't you worry about that. Play me in basketball. And so they start playing, but as they're playing, Denora notices that Shaney is getting a little too into this, and she's acting weird. Like she's like getting belligerent. She'll just hit the basketball hoop pole, run into it. She's getting violent and crazy. It had a very folkloric feel to it because, you know, very classic humans playing games with their lives as the stakes against spirits, right? At some point, Shaney's eyes change color into yellow, and she lets out a bestial like howl after Denora scores a point, and then Denora just knows in her bones, she's like, this is dangerous. So she makes a deal with Shani to let her go if she won the game. And so Shani is like, deal. So now Denora is playing hard, right? Because her life is on the line. But in the middle of this game, a shot rings out. And we see that Victor is somehow still alive. He had come all the way from the outhouse, and he shot Shani, who is Ponoka. And he's like, run! And so Denora starts running, and behind her she hears Ponoka murder Victor, but she just keeps running. And she's running. She somehow ends up around Duck Lake, and this whole time Ponoka is stalking her, and she's just like true horror movie fashion, walking, but ever creeping closer and never stopping. So she's running miles, right? Just waiting for help to arrive. While she's running away, suddenly a dying Nathan, somehow he survived that gunshot. He hopped up on a horse, and he shows up there half dead on the horse, and she sends the horse and him away. She's like, yo, get to town and tell my father that to come to Duck Lake and help me, because again, her dad is the game warden, Denny Peace. She sends Nathan off, and then she continues running. She's exhausted by this point also, but she continues running towards Duck Lake. And then eventually she comes to a field of bones, which is the site of the place that Lewis, Cass, Gabe, and Ricky murdered all these elk. Ponoka enters this field. She completely forgets about Denora, and she starts looking at the ground, and she starts digging in the earth where a baby elk is being born suddenly. And then we see Denny Peace shows up on that same ridge that all the guys were up on all those years ago, and he's aiming the gun down to shoot Ponoka, and Ponoka just jumps over the body of this new baby that had been born. And so Denora, seeing this, she's like, we can't let this happen. So she runs and she stands in front of her dad's aim, and she's like, just let them go, right? Denny puts his gun down, and Ponoka falls to the ground, because again, she's a woman, and her skin starts to split apart and fur comes out, and she full on turns into an elk, and her and the baby walk off, and Denora goes on to be a basketball legend. And that's essentially the book. That's really how it goes down. I really, the plot of this, the way the book is structured, I was not really prepared for it. So as far as my experience of it as a horror book, I give it about 3 stars. But as far as a literary fiction book that uses folkloric traditions to talk about societal issues, I think it's a really, really good book. And so I almost had more fun going through the meaning of the book after reading it than I actually did reading the book. But yeah, that's my feelings on The Only Good Indians, my first Stephen Graham Jones book. Hopefully I can edit this down to a decent size and it comes out in a way that isn't super scatterbrained, because I was kind of weird trying to explain all this time. But that's this. Next time you see me, we should, well, maybe not the next time, but we will do I Feed Her to the Beast and the Beast Is Me, the final book that I did for December of 2023 and 2024, Jesus. And yeah, Auf Wiedersehen. I'm gonna cut that out. Goodbye.